And away we go, as you say, Dan Raphael, winner of the Nat Fleischer Award, which we haven't mentioned yet. And we're into show 6. Can you believe that when you locked down, we would be doing shows transatlantically, which people are actually having a little bit of fun with and enjoying, I think.
I'm glad they are. But it's good. I mean, I enjoy talking to you, and it's good to talk boxing with somebody that knows what they're talking about, and it's enjoyable.
It's later in the day today, right? When we're recording this, and it's much closer to your dinner time. Yeah. So
I've got good news for you, Gareth.
Go on, come on, then break it. Break.
I know what's for dinner.
Go on, what's for dinner?
We are having chicken marsala,
Nice.
Home by my wife, who's an outstanding cook. Some roasted potatoes and a vegetable to be named. How's that sound?
Do you kind of name it as it arrives at the table? Do you give it a name like Malcolm? Or
no, I think it's a matter of like checking out what's in the fridge to see what we're in the mood for. You know,
but in this pandemic time, do you not call courgettes Malcolm or carrots Pete or Pete?
We've not yet gotten to naming our vegetables, but we'll take a look. We'll have a little discussion. I'll ask my wife what she feels like. My son will put his 2 cents in. We'll come up with something. Maybe broccoli, maybe green beans, maybe carrots, like you said. Maybe a mixture. Who knows? But you got the dinner menu. You happy now, you freak?
Not really, because I want to know what's for pud. What's for pudding?
No, we don't do that over here in the States. Come on now.
No pudding, no?
No pudding.
Wow. A little glass of wine with the meal or not?
Maybe my wife will have that. I'll probably go with just some cold water, but, you know, nothing fancy.
I must say I've never seen you drink.
Once in a while. I like a nice margarita if we're at the Mexican place having dinner or something like that. Maybe a little wine once in a while add to a nice dinner, but I'm not a big drinker.
Have I managed to persuade you into having a shot of tequila at the WBC dinner ever or not?
Tequila is, to me, a harrowing beverage. I have had a couple of shots in my life, and I find it to be absolutely repulsive. That's just me.
Oh, is that? I think maybe the tequila reaction has just made me fall back. Is that because you don't feel well on it?
I just find it to be disgusting. I don't like the flavor. I don't like the smell. I don't like the way it makes me feel. And I've been out. I remember one time having dinner in Las Vegas with our good friend Mauricio Suleiman at it's not there anymore, but it was the old, like, kind of nice sit-down Chinese restaurant that was in the MGM. And I guess it was a Chinese restaurant. And we were there with a bunch of us, maybe like 8 or 10 of us. And they ordered a bottle of tequila, and by the time that the like late lunch, early dinner was over, the entire bottle was gone. I was kind of horrified how they sucked that down. It seemed to be all right. So,
well, look, enough on alcohol and food. I've got a couple of questions for you. First of all, Bob Arum, in another one of those interviews, right? Thankfully, the news had slowed down a little bit. We spoke kind of end of last week. It's been a quiet kind of 3 or 4 days. Bob Arum hasn't announced officially, well, at least in the last few hours I hadn't checked, he hasn't officially announced June the 9th yet. But it's going on behind the scenes, isn't it? You know?
Right. I mean, the reason he hasn't announced anything officially is because
Nevada's not open, is it?
They still have to get all of the particulars in terms of how they're going to run the show officially set with the commission. That's what's at issue. Not to say that there's a problem, to my knowledge. Make sure that everybody is aware of what the guidelines are. The commission has to make sure that everybody is aware of them, has to adopt them in some capacity, not just for Top Rank, but for any other promoter, be it MMA or boxing, that's going to want to come and do an event in Nevada. They have to have the proper rules and regulations in place, and that takes some time. I mean, it's not as easy as just sticking 2 guys in the boxing ring and setting up a few judges and the referee in there and the producers for the television broadcast. There's a lot of complications as far as, you know, the protocols that they're going to follow in terms of testing and social distancing and who's allowed where and how many people they can have and all the different rules that are going to go into it, aside from just, you know, running a regular boxing event.
Well, it's going to, and also it's not just going to be here's an event. These protocols are going to be sustainable, presumably for several months. And as Bob would say, you know, as Uncle Bob would say to us, you know, if you think we're going to go ahead and do this fucking thing, you don't know shit about boxing, you know, because we got to do this properly. Will he?
Trying to be safe.
Will he? Exactly. It's got to be safe. Straw poll. He's 88 going on 89. Yeah. And he knows shit about boxing. Is he going to be there or not, in your view?
You know, that's a good question. I haven't talked to Bob about that in particular, and I actually want to ask him that because.
Should we ask him right now?
You know, Bob loves
being
at the fights. I mean, you could try, but Bob loves to be at the fights. And one thing about him, if you know Bob Arum, is when he puts on a show, big or small, very often, most of the time, he's there after, you know, he's there for, if not the first bell of the show, for the 4-rounder, certainly, you know, within a couple of fights on the undercard to watch the young guys that he's got coming up and some of those early fights involving the prospects. And at his age, you know, it's been made very clear that that's not the best for people in that age group to be, you know, in those kinds of environments. So I don't know what Bob's going to do. I mean, I'm sure Bob will be there. Whether he actually does show up or not, that's, you know, I guarantee you that his family and his wife.
Well, here we go. Bob, how are you?
Good.
Bob, I'm chatting to Dan Raphael on our boxing chat show at the moment. Dan and I are doing one every 2 or 3 days. We are just debating. We're doing a straw poll together whether you will be at your event in Vegas on June the 9th. I'm saying yes. What are you saying, Dan?
I don't know. I know Bob wants to be there. Lovey may have a different opinion.
Go on. What does Lovey say? And will you be at the event if it goes ahead?
Absolutely. I wouldn't allow an event to go on. I didn't feel that it was completely safe, and it would be terrible if I said that the thing was completely safe and then I didn't attend it myself. Of course I'll be.
Why would you have said anything else? Well, I just hope so. I'm going to ask you how, you know, Dan and I are just chatting it. How close are you to verifying June the 9th? We know there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, but are you optimistic it will go ahead?
I'm absolutely confident that it's going to go ahead.
Cool.
Absolutely confident. We're waiting for the appropriate time to release it. A lot of it has to do with ESPN. They feel, and rightly so, that they are against leaking any of it to the press until they decide they want to make an announcement on one of their most watched ESPN programs.
Gotcha.
And when it will be announced, it will be announced in that way, maybe on First Take with Stephen Smith or wherever. But again, they're paying the freight, and they have absolutely the absolute right to tell us when and how this should be released to get the most out of it from their standpoint. So I respect that completely.
And Bob, finally, Dan and I are about to debate this, and now we've got the man himself here. You were quoted, and there's all these kinds of ridiculous fucking stories out and about all the time, because people just grab something off a podcast. Is this genuine that it is possible that Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury 3 may take place this year in Saudi Arabia?
No, I mean, yeah, it's possible.
But is someone putting 2 and 2 together and coming up with 7 when they put this story out? Because they said they spoke to you.
What we did was say that I am working together with the consent of my partners in this PBC to do this fight outside the country, because we don't believe that this year it will be possible to do fights with spectators in the United States. And we are working on putting it. We have very, very good chance of doing it in 2 different countries, and we're working on that right now. And now, is it possible that it goes on, that it happens in Saudi Arabia. I assume it's happening. I mean, it's possible, but that ain't what I'm working on. I'm not working on doing the event in Saudi Arabia. I never talked to anybody in Saudi Arabia. I don't know anybody in Saudi Arabia. And I will say categorically that I have not approached anybody in Saudi Arabia. Nobody in Saudi Arabia has approached me. And so that is a non-starter. Have I been approached, and am I working with different locations in other parts of the world? The answer is clearly yes. But which countries they are and which places they are will be kept to myself until we're able to announce something.
Brilliant, Bob. Can I just finally ask, are you keeping well? Are you still in lockdown with Lovey, your lovely wife in Los Angeles?
Yeah, we will be moving or coming. I mean, moving is traumatic. We'll be going back to Vegas next Tuesday, day after Memorial Day, and I hope to be. We're opening our offices on June the 1st, and I will be there for the opening of the office, having taken all the necessary tests to show that I am coronavirus free, and that's what we're working on now. And I hope my office will be. I know my office will be open on
June the 1st.
June the 1st, and our first event in Nevada will take place on the
9th, hopefully.
The 9th of June.
Yeah.
And we expect now, initially, to do 3 events a week in the month of June.
Amazing.
Probably only 2 events a week in the month of July. That's open, but it'll be 3 events a week, current plan, in the month of July.
Brilliant, Bob. Finally, because I'm going to
June.
In the month, yeah. No, that's brilliant. So you're talking about basically getting almost like 15 events out in a couple of months. That's brilliant. You know.
That is exactly what ESPN has planned for us. The getting events in June or July.
Finally, Bob, when you get, because I'm going to Harley Street in London, you know, in near where you stay in London when you come here, I'm going to go and get tested in a private clinic next week. I'm hoping that I've had it already and I've got the antibodies in me. What are you hoping when you get tested?
Well, you know, I'm hoping, and I'm not positive, but again, it's conceivable that I had coronavirus, although I'm certainly not aware of it.
Yeah.
So I assume, and I know my wife, because she has a lung thing, has been tested as early as late as last week, this week, and she tested negative for it, but they didn't, and then she had no antibodies.
What's your favorite thing that you've learnt in lockdown finally, Bob? What's the most important thing you've learned?
That if you want to watch great entertainment, great series, you tune in on Netflix or Prime or Hulu to an English series or an Australian series, because they make what is being out in the United States that when you compare some of the English series and some of the Australian series, there's no comparison. So, had a great time. Talked to people. I talked to him.
That's funny because yeah,
we spend most of our time
talking about Netflix,
about English series, and he touts me on he touted me on something that Helen Mirren did in '94.
Oh, was she a police? Was she a police inspector in that one?
Yeah.
Oh, it's brilliant. Brilliant.
Suspect.
Prime Suspect. It's absolutely brilliant. Yeah, it's brilliant. It's yeah.
Just watching the second season of the years called "The Place to Call Home."
Okay. Cool. And I thought you were going to say, I don't fucking like lockdown because it feels too much like fucking retirement.
Yeah, well, that's right. You work during the day, you take calls, you do interviews, you plan getting back into action, and then you have the whole go out, usually time going out. And now the question is, what are we going to watch tonight?
Yeah.
I mean, the Israeli that's on Netflix called UDA is spectacular. We finished that, and HBO, the series, they finished the second season called A Brilliant Friend. That's unbelievable. So, you keep busy. It goes on.
We miss you, Bob. We can't wait to be with you again. Hopefully you'll join me on Talk Sport on Saturday night as well in the UK. We'd love to speak to you, by the way.
Good. As long as you can get me something to do and keep me busy, I'm happy to talk to you.
Lovely. And it's in your afternoon. So listen, stay well. And as you know, you're the man that knows the shit about boxing.
Okay.
Cheers, Bob. Cheers.
There we go. How about that?
Okay, so this is what we're doing on the show now. There you go, Dan. What do you make of what Bob said about those 2 months, first of all, in Vegas?
Well, that's not a surprise to me because I wrote a story recently about some of those dates. Like I think the first 5 dates they've got planned in the month of June. I thought it was like 3 shows and 2 shows, but maybe they're adding one. I know when I wrote it, it was sort of an evolving.
But that's a serious package, isn't it?
By the way, that's another reason why nothing has been officially announced besides what they've got to clear up with the commission. It's because it's not done yet with ESPN, and they're still trying to get all their ducks in a row as far as specific dates. And also, once you get the dates, you got to make sure that you have your boxers who know when they're coming back into the ring and get the matches made. They're under a little bit more of a little bit of an issue because it's going to be hard for them to travel international fighters because of the travel restrictions. So when it comes to some of their international boxers, it's going to be a problem. Now, I understand the Maloney brothers were able to come from Australia, so I would expect that both of those young guys will be on one of those early shows. But as far as traveling in opponents, let's say from Mexico or the Philippines or other country, it's hard. So the point is they're still putting all these events together, and I think they'll want to do what they did in the fall time and even before that, where they announced like several shows at one time, at least the main event and the co-feature. And keep in mind also, Gareth, and when any shows come back, whether it's Bob's shows or the cards in the UK that Eddie Hearn or Frank Warren might do or any other American shows, they're not going to be these gigantic cards. They're going to only have probably 4 or 5 fights. So yes, they're going to put on maybe 15 dates over the course of 2 months. But in reality, in terms of number of bouts, it'll be the equivalent of probably half of that number.
Yeah, because the
shows are going to be limited.
Yeah.
Fights, exactly.
Yeah.
But I'm very happy that Bob is moving on. I'm glad to hear that Bob, is going to be at his shows. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, well, that's probably 75 fights in June and July, basically. About 75 fights, which is brilliant news because that's 150 boxers who are going to be at work. And that's amazing. And I think we'll get some great matchups then,
Well, what the matchups are remains to be seen, I guess. But it'll be everything from the young 4-round fighters that haven't boxed for a while, all the way up to their fighters who are at the championship level. So, like every boxing fan, I'm sure you agree that we can't wait to see a live boxing match back in the ring, whether there's fans in attendance.
Well, I'm not a boxing fan, Dan. It's my job.
Well, maybe your job, and it's my job too. But I'm a fan also.
Well, it's semantics.
I don't think it's semantics at all.
No, I don't call myself.
It's not a hobby. It's like a lifestyle when you were involved in the sport like we are.
Let's not get into. All right, let's get into a fucking argument about what a fan is. Then, yeah, I see a fan as someone that pays money to go to an event.
No, because you can be a fan and watch it on TV, think about it, read about it, make it into a hobby, even if you're not making your income from it. Now, I spent the last 20 years making my living covering, talking about, writing about boxing. But when I'm not doing something for a particular gig, I still watch fights on my own time. I still enjoy my collectibles, my programs, and my posters and that sort of stuff. So you can be a fan, my cards. So you can be a fan and have issues or aspects of what you do related to boxing. It's not part of what I do for my job. So to me, it's sort of all in one. So I'm a fan and
yeah, I mean, I think that's what I'm saying. It's semantics. It's kind of, I think there's semantics going on here, because I would say at times I'm a historian and an aficionado of the sport. You are a fanboy because you fanboyed out about writing for Ring Magazine, the Ring Magazine.
I was excited about that.
I know you got your first article in, and I managed to troll you on Twitter for the first time ever, saying, "Oh, you fanboy."
Somebody asked me, why have you been doing boxing writing and reporting for 20 years? Have you never written for the Ring Magazine? It was very simple, because for the entirety of my 20 years involved, I've always been exclusive to one particular outlet. So when I worked for the first 5 years for USA Today, they didn't let you write for other outlets. Since I was at ESPN for 15 years, again, you were exclusive to them. Now that I'm not exclusive and I can go on TV or radio or wherever I want to go, it's a big thrill to have a story in Ring Magazine. As somebody that read it as a kid, that has collected the magazine for many years, I'm pretty psyched about it, particularly because my first article is about my all-time favorite fighter, Arturo Gatti, and Ring Magazine folks have a special issue coming out, I believe next month in June. It's an all Gatti Ward themed trilogy magazine, and so I got a chance to write one of the pieces. We're both friendly with Doug Fisher, the editor-in-chief. I've been knowing Doug my entire career, always liked and respect him. We always have had a good relationship. And, when I was no longer at ESPN, he asked me, would you be willing to do a piece for this magazine? I was like, absolutely. So we worked it out and I wrote the piece. So I was excited.
Well, I'm glad you're a fanboy of me, because as you know, I've written for them for 12 years and a regular monthly column. And like you, it's an absolute privilege to write for the Ring Magazine, because I do consider it to be the Bible of boxing. I mean, the sad thing is, recently, just to let people who are watching know, Boxing Monthly went out of business here a month ago in the UK. I noticed that Elliot Wursell, who is Boxing News' best writer, is not writing for them anymore. I'm worried about the future of Boxing News over here. It's a good rag. It really is. And that, with the pandemic, you just wonder, they've just changed hands as well. You wonder whether they're in danger as well. And, I enjoy reading that every week, but I've missed seeing my mate Elliot, because he is clearly their best writer. And that worries me for them.
Boxing Monthly, I have read for many, many years. And I was really surprised, frankly, when I think I heard about it, that they were closing up, because I follow Graham Houston, who's been working with them for many years. I saw him mention Twitter feed. I was shocked by that. And, sad to see that, because they did a hell of a job. But I don't think it was ever really the same once Glenn, their longtime editor, passed.
Of course, Glenn Leach died a few years ago now. And the great thing about Boxing Monthly was, and I wrote for them a few times, I remember writing a piece about Canelo and how he possibly had, years ago, about how he possibly had Irish ancestry with Los de los San Patricios, the Irish regiment that fought with the Mexicans in their war of independence with America. And they were the San Patricios, the statues were all over the place. And literally, those Irish fighters that survived had their pick of the women afterwards. So there were plenty of little Canelos running around with red hair.
Listen, but I mean, and boxing news, by the way, they've survived over 100 years. I think they've been around. So
it is just over 100 years, exactly.
So whether it's the printed publication or online, they do a fantastic job of covering not only
I agree.
the sport wide.
It will be a massive loss. And Ring Magazine, that's why we've got to keep Ring, because Ring's a couple of years away from being 100 years old.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Anyway, congratulations on getting your first piece in Ring Magazine. I don't think I've done anything this month. Next month, I've got a piece with Joe Calzaghe that I've sent them already, and with Vitaly Klitschko about that brilliant work that he's done against COVID-19 in Kiev as the mayor of Kiev. What an amazing job he's done there, keeping the deaths down to a tiny number in a city of almost 3 million people. One more thing. I mean, we weren't, that was an unexpected guest. I wanted the trolls that troll questions with us on Twitter to realize that when they say, how do you two know anything about boxing? We do that like with Bob or Frank or Eddie or Frank or Tim Smith, or we do that 3 or 4 times a day. Do you know what I mean?
Or managers or fighters.
But what I'm saying is,
other people in the business.
What I'm saying is,
read the question so they understand the nonsense that we were being asked.
I'm not even going to bother. But there were people trying to say earlier, what do we know? In what position are we to critique boxers having not boxed ourselves? And here's my answer to
first
that.
of all, you don't have to have performed a sport or an activity to know good or bad or otherwise. In other words, I don't have to have eaten shit to know that a plumber can take care of the business. You know what I mean? It's a preposterous.
Well, I'll put another one out. Mine is, does the Queen's gynecologist need to be a lady? Do you know what I mean? No, it can be a man. So
you're my expert on the Queen, not me.
No, I think over time, I know what sport is, and I know what being physical is. I can tell you that. I haven't walked to a ring and had a fight.
Here's the other thing about it that gets lost sometimes in the newer modern days of media. I didn't necessarily study boxing and then start writing about it. I was a journalist who covered a lot of other sports and other activities before I was covering boxing. So you have to learn how to be a journalist, whether you're covering a PTA meeting or an election or something in the government or a baseball game or a boxing match. You get those things down, and then having learned about boxing over the years, now you're put in a position. I work for the 2 biggest media outlets in the United States in terms of media, biggest newspaper for USA Today, biggest website and network for ESPN. Obviously, I learned something in 20 years. I wouldn't have been paid by those 2 outlets for as many years as I was paid. So for anybody to suggest that, after all that time, me or you or anybody else who we know at ringside doesn't know anything about boxing or how to write about it or how to critique it, whether it's the inside the ring or the business outside the ring, is just they just don't understand how the deal works.
You'll never score a fight as well as me, though, Dan. I'm afraid.
That may be the case, but
no. It's a sport of opinions as well. That's the amazing thing. Listen, we work and work and work. I'm the same. I'm a journalist. I've worked at the game. After the amount of time that we've been involved, and I've been involved even longer than you because I'm older than you. I'm nearly 28 years in the business. First fight, 1991, covering. So by this time. We know people might not agree with us in the industry, but they know how hard we've worked. And 8 or 9 times out of 10, we know what we're doing. We might get it wrong every now and again. Everyone does. The game plans are got wrong by corners and trainers when they go into fights sometime. We're always students of the game. We are part of the industry, and we're embedded within it. And it's not an easy job. People might look and think it's easier than it is, actually. It's not an easy job at all, is it?
No, and they don't understand either that in the positions that we've been in, the pressures that are brought to bear from all sides. You get stuff from promoters, you get stuff from your editors, you get stuff from the boxers, you get stuff from the TV people, and everybody pulls. And I've always just tried to either, when it's come to my viewpoint, just give my honest opinion, whether I was working for a network like ESPN that had rights to Top Rank fights or other fights before they did Top Rank fights, just give my honest opinion about what the situation was. And when it came to, covering the news of what's going on, is just write the straight news story. This is what the facts are as you know them. And, I'm a big believer in the truth will set you free.
Well, I've always said this. I know you know this about me, and you're very similar. And anyone that follows me at all will know I always say this. I will only write what I will say to someone's face, and that's
me too. Yeah.
That is my rule, because that is the way to be. That is how you get respect from people. I'm not going to hide from my opinions, but I'm not I'm also, Dan, I'm not overly critical of a guy with a big belly who drops his bag and comes and fights as a journeyman. I'm not critical of people in the way. I admire everyone that steps into the ring, but even if they're overweight, I admire them for doing it, and I don't lose that sense of. I never lose.
But that also doesn't mean you can't be critical when it's necessary. And one thing I have found is that, first of all, some boxers are very thin-skinned, can't take even the smallest bit of criticism. But other guys, if you've known them a long time and you've covered their careers for a long time, when it gets to a certain point, if you are critical, they may actually take that to heart because they know for so many years you've written all the positive things and been very fair. And they say, okay, you know what? I've known this guy for a long time. He's always done right by me. And if he's saying something critical, maybe there's something to it. And
yeah.
From different fighters, not publicly, but just in our private conversations between other boxers. Well, I'll tell you, it's a very prominent fighter, a long time, who's a former world champion, that was upset with some things I had written about him that were critical about not his fight inside the ring, but certain aspects of like deal making outside the ring, of fights that were either not taken or that were taken at what the details of that deal were. And I kind of was all over him about it. And years later, was approached by that boxer at an event we were at, and we sat down and chatted about it. And he was like, you know what, you were right. And I was like, okay, I appreciate that. He was man enough to come to me years later and say that. And I was like, yeah, that's cool. So, whatever goes on in the public domain, I've had a lot of conversations with boxers behind the scenes that I may have had dust up with here and there. And now, we're cool.
Yeah, it's just in exactly the same way that behind the scenes, sometimes when you get on really well with the trainer, they even ask you what your game plan would be against that fighter. And people might think that's ludicrous, but in private times, you posit game plans. And if they know you well enough, and I do pride myself on knowing some of the shapes that different fighters make with each other. It's something that I feel I've learned over time, and it's how I try and pick fights. And you get in some very deeply intellectual conversations it's what we're doing in fight week generally.
Gareth, it's not even just that. It's not even just the trainers. I mean, this is not something that's private. This is something that's been out in the public since the time it happened.
Yeah.
When Bernard Hopkins was looking for the final opponent of his career, and he ended up fighting Joe Smith. Joe Smith was the opponent that I told him about. And it wasn't like I was like outwardly.
You got him beaten up, baby.
Well, he did get knocked out, but the point was, Bernard Hopkins and I were in London having breakfast at the.
Yeah, I remember this.
There to cover the Triple G fight against Kell Brook for HBO's broadcast. I was there covering it for ESPN, and we had breakfast. And most of the time when Bernard and I would see each other and talk, we didn't really talk about boxing, to be honest. We talked about other, current events, politics, religion, our families, that sort of stuff. Bernard Hopkins wanted to speak about his career that morning. He wanted to line up a farewell fight, and he respected my viewpoints and my opinion. I'd known him for many, many years. I'd covered tons of his fights, and he asked me for some suggestions, and I gave him 2 names, and one of them was Joe Smith, and he liked it. He looked at the video. He went back and he studied his record, and he talked to his people at Golden Boy Promotions about it, and ultimately that was the fight that they took. It didn't work out for him, but the point is, boxers that know you will ask you that about who they should fight sometimes. That particular public.
Right, we're going to whip through, not all the questions, but we're going to whip through a few questions. Occasionally, we will call someone out of the blue. We might even get Tyson Fury one night on FaceTime, because he will sometimes pick up, and that's good fun. We're going to whip through the questions. Some of these might require deep answers, Dan, but we're well into this, and I don't like to make these too long. Less is more. Will poor judging ever be addressed?
I mean, it's been one of those things that people have tried to address for many years. I don't see anything changing unless there's something that happens that's absolutely radical, and I'm not sure what that is. So to me, the status quo is as it is. Hopefully they can train them better. You get people that are just more attentive during the actual bouts. So
in my view, the biggest fights, there should be there should be there should be a pound for pound judging list. And in the very expensive fights, the big fights that get the most attention around the world, I think they should just bring in rotate the top 6 to 8, and not necessarily use the commissions. And I think we'd get better results. But it's a subjective sport. As we were saying, it's a sport of opinions. Styles make fights, all those kind of things. So the 10-point must system is always going to throw wild things out there sometimes. So no, judging could be addressed, but you might still get weird results. Because you could get an incredibly close fight, incredibly close on what you're watching, and someone wins 120, 108. And that's
because each round could be close.
There you go. That's what I mean.
That's particular of the fighters. And so therefore, when the fight's over, it looks like a complete blowout.
That could be...
Mine, it's actually quite close because those rounds were sort of picked to, but you picked for one guy.
Exactly. Years ago, who was it? Was it Harry Greb, Jimmy Wild? Who was the great mover? I can't remember. Willie Pep. Years ago, I can't remember the name of the opponent now, but he told writers that in the third round, he was a brilliant mover. And he told writers, and they wrote it in the paper even at the time, it's recorded, that in the third round, he was fighting a brawler, but he wasn't going to throw a punch, but he was going to move brilliantly. And he won the rounds on all 3 judges' cards, but he didn't actually throw a punch, but he didn't get hit
Hard
either.
to do.
So
that would probably not happen in today's judging.
Yeah. Hey,
probably not.
Hey, remember Canelo Golovkin won?
I said probably not. All right, next question.
Where does Deontay Wilder go from here? Easy answer.
He goes to the third fight with Tyson Fury in a country to be determined.
Ditto. Will Billy Joe still get the Canelo? Billy Joe Saunders still get the Canelo fight next? And that's from Rob Weatherall.
I think that's possible, but it's going to depend largely on what happens when he has a hearing with the British board because of the impending punishment, suspension, what have you, from that video that he posted. So it's going to be about the timing. To my knowledge, the British board has not yet addressed that had a hearing yet. So, it's kind of up in the air. But if he got the fight, it would be because he's okay to do it. And if he didn't get the fight, it wouldn't shock me either.
The news on that, the very latest news is his team have not even put in their submission to have the hearing yet, which is bad news for him. He needs to get that done. That's most definitely very important. Will Floyd officially be Devin Haney's trainer going forward?
Well, I saw some video on the internet, I guess it was on Twitter, that was posted where Devin was in Mayweather's gym and Floyd was holding the mitts with him and they were working on some stuff. I don't think he's officially his trainer. I mean, they've known each other since Devin Haney was a young kid. He's been, living in Vegas and going to Floyd's gym, and they've known each other for a long, long time. Roger Mayweather, I can't remember if it was Roger Mayweather or Floyd Sr. that trained the kid for a little while or worked with him. But the father, Bill Haney, has done a good job training his son, and so I think that will continue unless
Paul Haney, yeah.
No, Bill Haney. Who would you say?
Paul.
No, not Paul. Definitely not Paul.
Is it not Paul that is dead?
You're thinking of Paul Andrade. Demetrius is dead.
No, I thought I must have lost it because I thought Devin's dad's name was Paul.
I don't think so. In any
He's
event,
never corrected me anyway. I always call him Paul, but there you go.
Devin's father has been his trainer and obviously done a very good job with his son. But if you have the opportunity to go spend some time with Floyd Mayweather in his gym, a guy you've known since you were a little kid, nothing but good can come of those lessons. So I don't think he's going to be Devin Haney's trainer, but that's not to say that he can't go to the gym with Floyd now and again and learn.
You're right, Bill.
Winners.
I've got to stop calling him Paul, haven't I?
Bill Haney, yeah. Okay.
He's never corrected me.
I was losing my mind.
No, I'm losing mine, clearly. I've always called him Paul. He introduced himself as Paul one day when I first met him years ago.
Anyway, I think Bill Haney is going to train his son, and if he can pick up some pointers from Floyd Mayweather, all that can do is help the kid learn his craft.
Let's just hope Paul Mayweather helps him, yeah? Right, finally, last couple of questions. And my request for the transatlantic chat show number 6 with Dan Rafael. What's the gag about Dan and donuts? There isn't one. Oh, there we go. I only mentioned donuts. There you go. The perfect noise. The donut gag is your son had a donut in our very first show. He was going to have a donut later on. And he said, no one better touch his donut. Do you remember?
And no one did because he got his donut. Trust me.
That's the joke. It's as simple as
that.
I
A joke there.
Wow. There's some questions here about people taking PEDs. I don't really want to address them, really. It's too big a subject. I'd like to do it in a whole where we can evolve.
What we can say in short form is that, yes, boxers take PEDs. Lots of them do. And not all of them get caught, unfortunately.
But the truth is, if you've been around this world long enough, you can see when people build their bodies anyway, you know. It's obvious, really. It's whether they get caught or not.
You got a few more there?
And I hope that Chris Back's Tazvar cookie. This is quite a good one. This is going to be the final one. I'll go back over the other ones for next time.
Okay.
I'm having a little break, but I'm prepared to do one with you next week because they're such fun. Cookie says, even though his handle is Humper a lot, and I hope he is in this pandemic, or her or him. Which boxer have you found to be the most intimidating outside the ring?
Outside the ring. Boy, that's a good question. Do you have any that come to your mind?
Yeah, I mean, Mike Tyson, when he came to the UK in 2000, was like, he got annoyed with a guy called Ron Shillingford from it was like a black newspaper, The Voice, and Ron had written a piece about him, and we were in a group together, and Tyson started wagging his finger at him. He was genuinely kind of a bit annoyed. You could feel the energy coming off him. But I've never. I've had Deontay Wilder right in my face giving me crap. Like, yeah. But the truth is, when I'm working, I'm so focused on working with them. I don't see them. They don't see us as a threat. They don't.
I can't say that I mean, I've had some difficult moments in person with fighters over the years, but never.
Your first interview with Mike Tyson, he made you feel like
story, but I was not. It didn't go well, and people can just Google that. It's kind of a mess. But I personally didn't really feel intimidated by it. And I've had some other fighters over the years, confront me about stuff I've written, and again, it's not a comfortable situation. But I never felt intimidated. Like I never really thought like, okay, the guy's gonna like punch me in the face or something like that. So I guess I would say from me anyway, nobody really. And to be honest, most boxers that you deal with, I mean, this is the vast majority. I think you'll agree with me, Gareth. Most of the athletes, most of these fighters that we interview and we talk to and we cover are extremely pleasant to deal with outside the ring. I mean, almost, all of them. There's a few that I could do without, but I'm not intimidated by them. But for the most part, most boxers are really good dudes to deal with, and ladies also. I mean, I'd say that about 95% of them are very enjoyable to work with and to talk to and to interview and to deal with.
Not intimidating again, but Adrian Broner can be a bit awkward sometimes. It's hard to get him to,
The thing with me and Adrian Broner is I've known Adrian Broner since he's like 18 years old. We have we joke with each other. We have kind of like, people think like we have this like horrible, like he hates me and I hate him. It's sort of like, it's like a love-hate thing. Like, he's looked up to my opinion about certain things. We've had many private conversations, interviews, etc. I know Adrian has his own problems outside the ring. I don't think he's genuinely a bad guy at all. Maybe a little confused about some things and has some problems for sure. But who of us doesn't have some problems, Yeah.
I think we're going to, I can see some more questions, but I'm going to note them and we'll do them next time because I wanted to keep these to 30 minutes, but we always go to about 50. You're off to have a beautiful dinner cooked by your wife. Yes. Do you lay the table or not?
Oh yeah. My son actually now, he helps set the table. She handles the cooking. I do all the dishes. So we split it up like that.
Listen, dishwasher pandemic extraordinaire. I shall see you next time. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I know what you're going to do right now. you're going to ask me to send this on to you so you can write all those little notes down that Bob Arum told us.
Oh, absolutely. I think that goes without saying. I'm assuming you're going to do the same thing.
No, I've got to write another 3,500 word feature or 2,500 word feature. I've got to get into a magazine in the morning.
Well, better you than me, my man.
Yeah, on the comeback of gyms, actually, which is a very interesting story.
That's a great topic.
Yeah, it is. It is, exactly. So, but it's always a pleasure, my friend.
All right, dude. I'll talk to you. We'll set it up for next week, and you have yourself a great night.
Yeah, you too. Cheers.
All right, guys. Take care.
Cheers.